Hello guys, I've got a very quick build video for you today of this lovely little kit from Das Werk. This is their German Kugelpanzer kit. This is essentially a what if kit. There was one Kugelpanzer built, which I will tell you more about shortly. Because this is such a small kit, Das Werk give us two Kugelpanzers in this box. That's quite handy really, considering they give us 4 possible painting schemes. A nice red primer factory scheme, and then 3 schemes with the Kugelpanzer either in use by the Germans, in use by the Japanese, or captured and in use by the Russians. So let's have a quick look inside the box. We get 2 sprues which are identical. Each sprue contains one entire Kugelpanzer. So this is it, this is the pieces for one model. So we've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 or 15 parts per model. There are no transparent parts, there's no photo etch parts, it's just one sprue and a couple of decals. The instructions are fairly straightforward, as you might imagine. There are a grand total of 2 steps. Then we have those paint schemes I mentioned before. And the decal sheet. The decal sheet includes the manufacturer's marks if you do the factory version, which is quite cool. So let's start with the build, and I'll tell you a bit more about the Kugelpanzer while I'm building. So the name Kugelpanzer apparently means literally spherical tank. It's not hard to see how it got that name. And these were built by Germany during World War II. There's only one surviving Kugelpanzer which can currently be found at the Tank Museum in Russia. And even the origins of the Kugelpanzer are somewhat mysterious. Some reports say that the example in the museum that we have today was exported from Germany to Japan, where it was used in Manchuria and the Soviets captured it there. Other reports say that the vehicle was captured at the Kummersdorf proving grounds in Germany towards the end of World War II, along with the Maus tank. It's also been apparently quite difficult for researchers to get access to the example in the Kubinka tank museum in Moscow, and therefore we know very, very little about this vehicle. We know nothing about its interior, we know nothing really about when it was built or how it was used, and we don't really know what its purpose was, other than hypothesizing that it is some kind of reconnaissance vehicle. So it's a bit of a mystery overall really, the Kugelpanzer. And as you can see, the kit has gone together very easily. It took me probably half an hour to build each one of these, and that includes the time to clean up the pieces as well. There was a bit of cleanup required on the circular pieces. The only problem we have here is that there is that seam line going down the middle of the tracks on both sides. I did consider trying to fill that, but then I figured if I filled it I'd have nothing to sand in between there anyway to get the filler going back to the right level, and so I decided to leave that and try to cover it later on, perhaps with some mud and some weathering. Once the kits were built, I gave them a coat of Tamiya primer and then a coat of XF69 NATO black. And I decided to go for the factory red primer scheme and the Soviet captured scheme. So here's our Soviet example. This was painted with AK Real Colors Protective Green. Now I know this is a 1920s, 1930s colour, not a World War II colour, but I still like it for its shade, and it will darken down a bit anyway once it's had some varnish on it. I masked off the stripe and painted it with Tamiya white acrylics. Surprisingly hard to get a straight stripe going over a bulbous surface like that. And the German factory version was painted with AK Real Colors red primer. And as you can see, the paint on both those vehicles has gone down very, very nicely. A lovely matte finish. I deliberately went a little light on the white stripe because I wanted to look slightly field applied. I then took to painting the track sections, for want of a better word, using a mix of Vallejo, brown and black. It came out a little too black. Just like with regular tank tracks, I use some aluminium paint dry brushed over the raised edges and around the circular edge. This looks quite bright now, but it will be toned down later. I did use the included decals for the Soviet stars, but then I found they peeled off quite easily later on, so I simply painted them on by hand. I wanted the Soviet vehicle to be a bit dirty, so I used some of this AK dry ground acrylic texture, very similar to my recent Staghound. I used a cocktail stick or toothpick to put that very carefully, small amounts of it, into the teeth. That also helps to cover up that seam line there between the two parts. This is acrylic paste, so you can thin it and blend it with water. I made sure to include the underside too. Once that was dry, I applied a few airbrush layers of XF52 flat earth, mixed with a small amount of light grey. This was painted very thinly over the acrylic paste, over the tracks, and a small amount on the bottom half of the sides, to give a general sort of dust coating. The procedure here was very similar to my Staghound weathering, so I took some loose ground enamel from Ammo by MiG, applied it sparingly on the tracks. I wasn't trying to cover all of the brown paint at this point, rather just to add some colour variation. That was then thinned with some enamel thinner. The thinned enamel paste was then flicked on to make some splashes, starting from the bottom. You can change the size of the splats by changing the distance from the model and by changing the amount of enamel thinner in the mixture. Perhaps slightly out of sequence, but I used a brown oil paint thinned with enamel thinner as a pin wash. Of course, I did this on the red German model as well as the Soviet one. I didn't want to do too much more weathering on the red primer version because I do want it looking basically factory fresh. To reinforce that look of being fresh from the factory, I wanted to include some manufacturer marks. Das Werk do include decals for this, but I decided to use a watercolour pencil and draw those on myself. And with that done, this quick build was complete. So let's take a look at the final images. So guys, there was my quick build of the Das Werk Kugelpanzer. This was supposed to be a quick, fun project, and I think it achieved that. As you saw, this is an absolutely tiny kit, very simple. The bonus, of course, being that you get 2 of them in the box. I had a lot of fun with this. I didn't want to go to town on the weathering. I have seen some really good examples of models with very well weathered primer red, but I quite like this factory fresh look, to be honest. So all that remains is for me to say firstly thank you to my Patreon supporters for their continued support. It is massively appreciated, guys, thank you very much. And of course thank you to you for watching. If you enjoyed the video then please do consider giving it a like or leaving a comment below. And if you'd like to see more videos like this then please consider subscribing. Until next time, have fun modelling guys, and I will see you soon.